A slew of stronger than expected earnings reports helping to support the markets today. And so far, the first quarter earnings season has been a good one. What does it tell us about what's around the corner? Our next guest says the key to the next quarter will be the consumer. We're joined by Richard Peterson, Standard & Poor's Director of Research, Strategy, and Innovation. Welcome to InBusiness, Rich.
Great to be here, Margaret.
The data seems to point us in the direction of further growth. This seems promising. Is it that clear of a read?
Well, in fact, the data is clearly showing us that things are improving. The fact is, when we started earnings season back on April 11th, when Alcoa reported, expectations according to Capital IQ estimates for the first quarter was about 12.3% growth rate. Now we're seeing about over 14%. Move those numbers forward, we're seeing consistent double-digit growth throughout 2011 for, looking for maybe upwards to $100 per share for the S&P 500.
So what do you mean that it's going to be decided now by the consumer? Is that a catch point?
Well, we're seeing like an improvement, albeit modest in terms of job creation. Retail sales were very strong at the end of 2010. They remain strong in 2011. Right now, for the first quarter, expectations for consumer discretionary companies and the S&P 500 for about 10.4% growth rate. Jump to the third quarter of 2011, that's going to be over 20%. So we're going to see improvement throughout the year.
So we've got the financials out there. We've got some of the industrial companies that have already reported. Do you expect in another week or two, when we hear from the consumer companies themselves, the Walmarts, et cetera, that we will see further weakness?
Well, that's a good question, because we obviously, all signs are looking at how energy prices are, and we see the pictures of $4, $5 gasoline and how that affects, the pocketbook of the consumer. But if you look at the macro picture, jobs are being created, the economy is growing, companies are gaining revenue both within the United States and overseas. Taking into context that if you look at the S&P 500, probably a majority of revenues are coming from outside the country. Countries have a lot of cash on hand to do a lot of things, and that may very well see some hiring going forward.
So, but that picture would seem to indicate corporate America and Main Street America are experiencing two very different things. Well, yet you have an Apple report that shows the willingness of the consumer to continue to pay for high-ticket items.
Well, again, it goes back to that proverbial wall of worry, and the fact is that you have these dichotomy between numbers that show growth and a very positive sign, and then indications that maybe we're not as on a fast track. I think what also take into account next week can be very critical, because you have Chairman Bernanke giving his press conference.
His first one ever.
And first one ever, and we're going to see, what happens with QE2. How is that winding down going to happen, or will in fact will it be a QE3?
Do you believe there will be?
At this point, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I think right now, the combination has provided liquidity, provided stimulus, provided enough to the market to levitate equity prices.
But you are concerned that inflation pressures are building here, and you're seeing that within some of the corporate reports.
Well, we're seeing that in commodities, by extension. If you look at the individual sectors, one of the other sectors that is doing well in terms of growth rates is really materials. We're seeing at the price of gold at $1,500 per ounce. So obviously that's a harbinger of what can be building in the system.
Your analysis here of earnings, you're looking at a record $98.49 per share. That's above the record that we saw back in 2007 before the crisis. And
again, it just shows you where stocks are. I mean, we're looking at the S&P 500 at about 1330. You're trading at like about less than a 13.5 times year ahead expectations. Go out to 2012, those numbers are probably going to continue at double-digit clips. Now, obviously, there could be a black swan, there could be some exogenous event that may occur that can nullify those numbers. But right now, we're pretty well in the sweet spot.
It seems that way in the trade of late. Thank you so much, Rich. It's always interesting to talk to you.